They say money changes people. I used to think that was just a bitter thing poor people said to feel better about the rich. I don't think that anymore because the night my parents promised $1 million to whichever one of their children gave them their first grandchild, I watched my family, my flesh and blood become strangers before my eyes. My name's Caroline Mercer. I'm 29, single, no kids, no prospects. I'm the career girl of the family, the one who wasted her best years chasing degrees and job titles, while my siblings settled down and played house. And up until that night, I was okay with that. I was okay being the quiet one in the background, the one they barely noticed at holidays. But sitting there in my parents' chandelier-lit dining room, hearing the words spill from my father's lips like it was some casual raffle prize, I realized things were about to get ugly and somehow I was already in the crosshairs. It had started off like every other Mercer family dinner, stilted small talk, fake smiles, and quiet judgment. My parents, Harold and Elaine Mercer, were old money the kind who thought emotions were messy and reputations were everything. My older brother Andrew was there with his wife who hated me for reasons I still didn't understand. My younger sister Lila was glowing, newly engaged to a man who looked at everyone like he was calculating their net worth. And then there was me, squeezed between the china cabinet and the window like an afterthought. We were halfway through dessert when Dad cleared his throat, tapped his wine glass, and said in that voice that brokered $1 million deals, "Your mother and I have decided it's time for some incentive." Everyone paused, forks midair, conversations dying. $1 million, he said, raising his eyebrows meaningfully, to the first Mercer grandchild. At first, nobody moved. For a second, it was like the entire room sucked in a breath and forgot how to let it out. Andrew's wife was the first to react, letting out a high, brittle laugh like it was the best joke she'd ever heard. Lila's fiancé turned sharply toward her, his face lighting up in a way that made my stomach twist. And then came the questions fast, sharp, and overlapping. Was it taxed? Was marriage a requirement? Did adoption count? What if twins were born at the same time? My parents answered with the same calm detachment they used to discuss estate plans and trust funds. Biological child, my mother said crisply, dabbing her mouth with her napkin. First one to deliver gets the prize. Simple. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there smiling, invisible as always, feeling the first crack splinter through the foundation of everything we thought we knew about each other. By the time the plates were cleared, the damage was done. Andrew and his wife were already whispering fiercely at the end of the table, throwing quick glances at Leela and her fiancé who were practically buzzing with energy. I knew what was happening, even if nobody said it out loud. It wasn't about love anymore. It wasn't about family. It was about a race, a brutal, desperate sprint to the finish line with $1 million check waiting at the end. And there I was, not even in the running, no boyfriend, no baby, not even a maybe. But somewhere deep down, in the part of me that still believed in miracles, I smiled. Because they didn't know my secret. They didn't know that tucked quietly beneath the surface of my boring, invisible life, something was already growing. And by the time they found out, it would be far too late to stop what I had already started. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the stars stretching like a velvet net overhead, I clutched my jacket tighter around my stomach, feeling the tiny, precious flutter that only I could feel. 6 weeks along, no one knew, no one suspected. And maybe for the first time in my entire life, being invisible wasn't a curse. It was my weapon. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, replaying every moment from dinner like a movie I couldn't shut off. I could still see the hungry gleam in Andrew's eyes, the way Lila's fiancé squeezed her hand just a little too hard, the way my parents sat back like puppet masters pulling strings. I ran my fingers over my stomach, still flat, still invisible, and wondered what would happen if I told them now. Would they believe me? Or would they accuse me of scheming for the money like everyone else? The truth gnawed at me. Even if I wasn't chasing the million, even if I would have had this baby without a penny attached, no one would see it that way. In their world, everything was a transaction. Love, loyalty, life itself, it all had a price tag. And in their eyes, I was about to become the most suspicious bidder in the room. 2 days later, the call started. At first, it was just my mother checking in with an edge of forced casualness. "Are you seeing anyone, dear?" she asked, voice light like spun sugar, but with a steel core underneath. I could almost hear the panic clicking behind her words. I mumbled something non-committal and hung up quickly, heart pounding. Then Leela called, pretending to want to catch up. I wasn't stupid. She wanted intel. I wanted to know if I was a threat. I smiled through the conversation, gave nothing away, and hung up feeling both victorious and sick to my stomach. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a battleground. Every call, every text, every pop and visit was a scouting mission, a desperate to figure out who was leading the race for the $1 million prize. It didn't take long for the first real blow to land. A week after the announcement, Lila posted an engagement photo shoot on Instagram, her caption practically screaming at the world, "Can't wait to start our little family, bless future mama." Comment section exploded with congratulations and heart emojis, but I knew it really was a shot across the bow. A warning to the rest of us, she's coming for the prize. I stared at the post for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to call her out, to rip away the shiny facade and expose the greed underneath. But the smarter part of me, the part that had learned to survive this family, knew better. Let them play their games. Let them underestimate me. The real fireworks hadn't even started yet. By the end of the month, the whole family was buzzing with rumors. Andrew's wife was off birth control. Lila was trying. I even heard whispers about some rush weddings being planned just to make babies look more legitimate. Meanwhile, I went to work every day, smiled at my coworkers, kept my doctor's appointments in secret. The irony wasn't lost on me. While they were frantically trying to create life for a payday, I was the only one actually carrying it. And yet, in their eyes, I was still the least likely to succeed. The family disappointment, the cold career woman, the safe bet to ignore. I knew it couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, my secret would out. And when it did, it would be like dropping a lit match into a dry forest. But I also knew I had to be careful. Timing was everything. If I played this wrong, they'd accuse me of lying, of scheming, of manipulating the situation to steal the million. No, I had to let them think they'd won. Let them scramble and claw and tear each other apart. Then, when they were too exhausted to fight anymore, I would reveal the truth and watch the house of cards collapse. Late one night, sitting on the worn couch in my dark living room, I made a plan. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to win it. Not the million, I didn't even want it anymore. I wanted something bigger, something better. I wanted to show them all that the thing they thought was a prize, a baby for money, was something they could never buy. Not with $1 million, not with $1 billion. And when the dust finally settled, they would realize the truth, the one they dismissed, the one they overlooked, had always been the real heir to everything they claimed to value. I rested my hand over my stomach again, feeling the faintest flutter like a secret handshake between me and the tiny life growing inside. "We've got this," I whispered into the dark. And for the first time in years, I believed it. The first public explosion happened a week later at a charity gala my parents insisted we all attend. On the surface, it was a sparkling night, ball gowns, champagne, the clink of crystal glasses, but underneath, it was a pressure cooker ready to blow. I knew it from the moment I walked into the ballroom and saw Andrew's wife clinging to his arm a little too tightly, her smile stretched thin, her eyes darting toward Lila like she was a loaded gun. The tension between my siblings crackled in the air, thick and poisonous. I tried to keep my distance, hovering near the buffet table, nibbling at overpriced cane apes, and pretending I didn't notice the silent war raging just a few feet away. But then Andrew made the first move, and like dominoes lying too close together, everything fell apart faster than I ever could have predicted. "Lila," he said, his voice just loud enough to carry across the group gathered around the champagne fountain. "I hear you and Carter are trying for a family. Hope it's not too much pressure. At your age," he smiled, faux sweet, but the dig was sharp enough to draw blood. Lila's mouth dropped open. She was 26, hardly ancient, but in Mercer terms, any delay was seen as a liability. Carter stepped forward, his jaw tight. "We're doing just fine," he snapped. "You might want to focus on your own situation before you start taking cheap shots." Andrew's wife let out a sharp, ugly laugh, and suddenly the whole room was watching. It didn't matter that dozens of strangers surrounded us. It didn't matter that my parents' reputation was at stake. For the first time in my life, my perfect siblings were unraveling in public, and it was glorious. Lila recovered quickly, squaring her shoulders and flashing a brittle smile. Well, she said, tilting her head, we have youth on our side. I'm sure it'll be harder for others. She didn't even look at me as she said it, but the message was clear. In their minds, I wasn't even in the race, an old maid, a non-threat. I sipped my sparkling water and said nothing, letting their petty, venomous words wrap around each other like snakes. Let them think I was irrelevant. The more they underestimated me, the better. Across the room, my mother watched with a frozen smile, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She wouldn't intervene. Not yet. She wanted a grandchild more than she wanted decorum. She would let the wolves fight it out, then swoop in to crown the winner. If only she knew she was already too late. Later, as the gala wound down, I slipped outside to the balcony for some air. The cool night brushed against my skin, and for the first time all evening, I felt like I could breathe. I leaned against the railing, staring at the glittering city skyline, and let my hand drift to my stomach. It was still early, but I thought I could feel it, the tiniest bloom of life, fragile but fierce. Behind me, the heavy doors creaked open. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was before he even spoke. You're quiet tonight, Carter said, his voice low. Not getting involved in the family circus? I smiled without looking at him. What's the point? I said lightly. It's not like I have a horse in the race. There was a pause, and I could feel him studying me, weighing something in his mind. You're smarter than the rest of them, he said finally. Always have been. His words sent a strange shiver down my spine, part warning, part something else. I turned then, meeting his gaze. His expression was open, almost too open, and I realized with a sinking feeling that Carter wasn't just here to make small talk. He was trying to gauge me, maybe even recruit me. Whatever you're thinking, I said, keeping my voice steady, don't. He gave a small, tight smile and stepped back. Suit yourself, he said. But this isn't going to end the way anyone thinks. He disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone on the balcony, heart hammering. I stood there for a long time, watching the city lights blur and dance in the distance. Carter was right about one thing. This wasn't going to end the way they thought. It was going to be worse, because the secret I was carrying wasn't just a baby. It was a time bomb. And when it went off, no one, not Leela, not Andrew, not even my parents would escape the fallout. The next morning, my phone buzzed before sunrise. I groaned, pulling the covers over my head, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a text from Lila, brunch today. Just the sisters, I stared at it for a long moment, my stomach twisting into knots. Lila never wanted sister time, unless there was something in it for her. I had no doubt she was fishing for information. I almost ignored it. But then I remembered what Carter had said last night, and a cold calm settled over me. If they wanted to play games, fine, I could play too. I typed back a quick sure. See you at 11, and set the phone down, my mind already racing. I wasn't just going to survive this brunch, I was going to turn it into an opportunity. One thing my family had taught me well, the best way to win a war was to let your enemies think they were winning, right up until you took everything they wanted most. Brunch was at one of those overpriced cafes my parents loved, the kind with gold leaf in the butter and $18 omelets. Lila arrived 10 minutes late, floating in like she owned the place, her engagement ring flashing under the chandelier lights. She air-kissed my cheeks like we were actresses on a red carpet, then slid into the booth across from me. You look great, she chirped, her voice too bright, her eyes too sharp. So, how's life? I smiled blandly and shrugged. Busy, works crazy, you know how it is. I watched her closely, noting the slight furrow in her brow. That wasn't the answer she wanted. She leaned forward, dropping her voice. I mean, outside of work. Any new developments? There it was. The real reason she dragged me out here, she wanted to know if I was a threat. I sipped my coffee slowly, buying time, then gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Lila, please, you know me. No time for that kind of thing. For a moment, she visibly relaxed, and I could almost see her mentally crossing my name off her list. It stung more than I wanted to admit. No one in my family ever thought I was capable of building a life outside of boardrooms and spreadsheets. But instead of letting it hurt, I let it fuel me, let her think I was harmless. Let her think she had it in the bag. Well, Leela said, tossing her hair back, that's probably smart. Kids are so much work, and it's not like you can just snap your fingers and make it happen. Her words were casual, but the edge underneath them was sharp. She was already trying to plant seeds of doubt, trying to discourage me from even trying. I smiled sweetly. "You're right," I said. "It's a huge responsibility. Definitely not something you rush into just for incentives." I watched her flush, her perfectly manicured hands clenching around her mimosa glass. Score one for me. The rest of brunch was a tightrope walk. Lila alternated between fake sisterly concern and barely disguised gloating about our future plans. By the time we finished, I was exhausted, but I kept up the act until the very end. As we stood outside waiting for the valet, she hugged me tightly, whispering, "No hard feelings, okay? May the best Mercer win." I hugged her back, my smile tight. "Oh, don't worry," I murmured. "She will." Lila pulled back, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. But I was already turning away, sliding into my car before she could ask what I meant. I drove home with the windows down, letting the cool wind clear my head. The first battle was over. The war was just beginning. That night, I pulled out a notebook and started making lists. Not baby names, not nursery plans. No, this was something else entirely. Enemies, alliances, weaknesses, Andrew's pride, Lila's insecurity, Carter's ambition, my parents' desperation. I mapped it all out like a general planning an invasion. If they wanted a fight, I was going to give them one they'd never forget. But I wasn't going to fight dirty, not yet. First, I would let them destroy themselves. I would let their greed rot them from the inside out. All I had to do was keep my secret a little longer and wait for the perfect moment to strike. I looked down at the notebook, the pages filled with names and notes and strategies, and felt something harden inside me. I wasn't the same girl who used to hide in the corners of Mercer family events, praying not to be noticed. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I was a mother now. And mothers, I was learning, would do anything to protect their children, even if it meant burning the whole world down to keep them safe. 2 days later, the first real trap was set, and I almost walked straight into it. It started with a casual text from Andrew's wife, Samantha. We were never close. Samantha always treated me like a weird science project she didn't understand, poking at my life choices with fake smiles and passive-aggressive comments. So when she invited me out for coffee and girl talk, I knew something was off. Still, I agreed. Curiosity was a dangerous thing, and part of me wanted to see just how low they were willing to sink. We met at a sleek, sterile cafe downtown, the kind with uncomfortable chairs and drinks that looked better on Instagram than they tasted. Samantha was already there, waving from a corner booth, her smile tight and rehearsed. I slid into the seat across from her, keeping my face carefully neutral. "So good to see you," she chirped, flipping her blonde hair over one shoulder. We never get enough time to just bond. I forced a smile and nodded, waiting. She didn't waste much time. Barely 5 minutes into polite nonsense about the weather and work, Samantha leaned in, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "You know," she said, stirring her overpriced lat with unnecessary force, "Andrew and I have been trying for months. It's been hard. Stressful." She glanced up at me through her lashes, a perfect performance of vulnerability. "I just thought, between sisters, maybe you could back off a little. Give us a chance?" For a second, I genuinely didn't understand what she was saying, and then it hit me. She thought I was trying. She thought I was a threat. She thought I was competition. I stared at her, stunned, as the realization sank in. Somehow, despite all my careful hiding, rumors had started to swirl. My invisibility was cracking. I blinked, slowly, giving myself a moment to respond. "I'm not sure what you mean," I said, keeping my voice light. Samantha smiled, all teeth. "Oh, come on, Caroline. Everyone knows you're seeing someone. Someone serious. There's no shame in it, but maybe you could let Andrew and I have this." Her hand fluttered dramatically over her heart like she was asking me for some enormous, noble sacrifice. Inside, my blood boiled. They didn't want me to have happiness. They didn't want me to have love. They certainly didn't want me to have a child and $1 million. In their minds, I wasn't supposed to win. I was supposed to stay in my lane, quiet and obedient, applauding from the sidelines while they raked in all the rewards. I set my coffee cup down carefully, my hands steady. "I'm flattered you think I have so much power over the outcome," I said smoothly. "But I assure you, I'm not competing with anyone." Samantha's smile faltered for just a moment. Then she leaned even closer, her perfume cloying and sharp. "Just remember, Caroline," she said, her voice low and syrupy, "sometimes it's better to know when you're beat. No hard feelings. She patted my hand like I was a child and slid out of the booth, her heels clicking sharply against the tile as she sauntered away. I sat there for a long moment, breathing slowly, forcing the anger down into a cold, hard knot in my chest. They were getting desperate. They were showing their hands too early. That was good. Desperation made people sloppy, and sloppy people made mistakes. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I found the number I needed. If they were going to escalate this into sabotage and manipulation, I needed allies too, even if that meant reaching out to people I had cut out of my life a long time ago. That night, I met my old friend Megan for dinner. Megan was everything my family hated: loud, messy, fiercely loyal. We hadn't spoken much since college, but I knew if anyone could help me, it was her. Over burgers and milkshakes, I spilled everything: the $1 million deal, the sudden war, the pregnancy no one knew about. Megan listened without interrupting, her face a shifting landscape of horror, amusement, and disbelief. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her chair and whistled low. Damn, Care. Your family's a soap opera. I laughed for the first time in what felt like weeks. Tell me about it? Megan grinned wickedly. Well, lucky for you, I love a good plot twist. Let's blow their minds. As we sketched out plans on napkins, plotting ways to protect my secret, maybe, just maybe, deliver a little poetic justice, I felt a strange, fierce hope bloom in my chest. For once, I wasn't alone. I had allies. I had a plan. And this time, I wasn't going to play by their rules. If they thought they could trap me, they were about to find out just how badly they'd underestimated the quiet girl. By the following weekend, the gloves were off. What had started as passive-aggressive jabs and whispered rumors turned into all-out warfare. Lila and Andrew were no longer hiding their contempt for each other or anyone who stood in their way. It was at a family casual dinner my mother insisted on hosting, under the delusion that keeping things normal would somehow stitch the family back together. Normal. Please. Nothing about what was coming was normal. As soon as I stepped through the grand front doors, I knew it was going to be a bloodbath. The air was too tight. The smiles were too forced. And the barely concealed panic in my mother's eyes confirmed what I already suspected. Things had gotten worse since the gala. Much worse. We gathered around the massive dining table like soldiers being summoned for a ceasefire we all knew wouldn't last. Andrew's wife, Samantha, was practically vibrating with suppressed rage. Lila looked like she hadn't slept in days, her makeup perfect but brittle like a porcelain mask about to crack. Carter was glued to his phone, barely glancing up as my parents launched into a hollow toast about family unity. I tuned them out, scanning the room, feeling the undercurrents swirling in the silence between their words. And then it happened faster, sharper than I expected. Andrew cleared his throat, setting his glass down with a clink. I think we should address the elephant in the room, he said, his voice smooth but razor-edged. Lila, maybe you should tell everyone about the fertility treatments you've been hiding. The silence that followed was electric. I saw Lila's hand tighten around her fork, her knuckles white. You're a liar, she hissed. You don't know what you're talking about. Andrew smirked, pulling out his phone like a magician revealing a hidden card. Actually, I do. Carter's name showed up on an in-show approval for IVF. Guess you two aren't quite as ready to pop out that golden ticket as you made it sound. Ha. My mother gasped, clutching her pearls like a cliche. My father's face turned an alarming shade of red. Samantha sat back, smug and triumphant, while Carter swore under his breath. Lila stood up so fast her chair screeched against the hardwood. You're disgusting, she snapped, her voice shaking with rage. You hacked our insurance. You're sick, Andrew. I wanted to intervene. I wanted to scream at them both for reducing something so painful, so personal, into a weapon. But I stayed silent, hands folded neatly in my lap. Let them tear each other to shreds. Every ugly truth they dragged into the light made my path that much easier. The dinner dissolved into chaos, accusations flying, alliances shifting by the second. Andrew stormed out first, Samantha hot on his heels. Lila burst into tears, Carter guiding her out with a stiff arm. My parents sat there in stunned silence, staring at the wreckage of their perfect family. I stayed a moment longer, sipping my wine slowly, savoring the taste of quiet victory. But the high didn't last long. Later that night, as I parked outside my apartment building, a dark figure stepped out from the shadows. My heart jumped into my throat. My keys slipped from my hand, clattering onto the sidewalk. Relax, Carter said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. I just want to talk. I didn't move. Every instinct screamed at me to get back in my car, to drive away, to call someone. But I stayed frozen in place. Carter stepped closer, his face hard and unreadable under the streetlights. I know what you're doing, he said quietly. And I know you're ahead. His voice was low, dangerous. But you need to understand something, Caroline. They don't play fair. They never have. I swallowed hard. What do you want, Carter? He smiled grimly. Just a warning. Watch your back. Because now that they're scared, they're going to come for you. He turned and disappeared into the night, leaving me shaking in the cool air, my mind racing. I picked up my keys with trembling fingers and hurried inside, bolting the door behind me. Alone in the silence of my living room, I pressed my hand against my stomach, feeling the faintest pulse of life growing inside me. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore, I was fighting for both of us, and no matter how ugly it got, I wasn't going to lose. Not to them. Not this time. The next attack didn't come with fists or threats. It came through whispers. It started small, an odd look from my boss, a few coworkers acting stiff around me, emails that used to be friendly now clipped and formal. At first, I thought I was imagining it. But then one morning, after a staff meeting, my friend Elise pulled me aside, her face tight with concern. You should know, she said, glancing around nervously. There's talk going around the office. About you. About your situation. My heart dropped into my stomach. What situation? I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. Elise hesitated. That you're pregnant. And that you're angling for some big payout from your family. That you're planning to leave the company once you get the money. Her voice was low, apologetic. I don't believe it, but people are talking. I stood there, frozen, as the pieces clicked into place. Someone had leaked it. Someone had decided if they couldn't beat me privately, they'd try to ruin me publicly. My mind immediately went to Lila and Samantha. It reeked of desperation and cruelty, exactly the kind of move someone would pull when they felt the walls closing in. I thanked Elise, plastered on a brave smile, and made it through the rest of the day without collapsing. But inside, fury burned hot and sharp. They wanted to paint me as greedy, as cold, as selfish. They wanted to strip away everything I built, my reputation, my career, my independence, before I even had a chance to tell my story. They thought if they attacked first, they could define me. They were wrong. That night, sitting on my bed with my laptop glowing in the dark, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my old blog, long abandoned, when I started working insane corporate hours. Back when I was in college, writing had been my escape, my way of making sense of the chaos around me. And now it was going to be my weapon. I typed for hours, pouring everything onto the screen, not the petty details about the $1 million, not the family scheming, but the real story, about being the invisible daughter, about growing up in a world where love was conditional and worth was measured in dollars, about finally choosing something for myself, something bigger than money or approval. I didn't mention names. I didn't need to. The truth, raw and aching and real, would be enough. When I finished, I posted it anonymously, tagging a few writers' groups and online communities I used to belong to. Then I closed the laptop and went to bed, heart hammering but lighter than it had been in weeks. I wasn't going to play their game anymore. I wasn't going to fight them on their turf. And I was going to tell my own story in my own words. And if they wanted to tear me down, they'd have to do it in the open, in the light where everyone could see them for what they really were. By the next morning, the post had gone semi-viral. Hundreds of comments, thousands of shares, people relating, cheering, sending messages of support. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee growing cold in my hands, watching the flood pour in. For the first time, it wasn't about the Mercers. It wasn't about the $1 million. It was about me, my story, my truth. And no matter what they threw at me next, they couldn't take that away. I smiled, feeling the baby flutter inside me, stronger now, more certain. I wasn't invisible anymore. And if my family thought they could control me, shame me, break me, they were about to find out just how wrong they had been. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was a reckoning. And I was just getting started. By the end of the week, I knew things were spiraling out of control, not for me, but for them. My anonymous blog post had exploded into something bigger than I ever imagined. It wasn't just going viral in quiet corners anymore. It was making its way onto larger platforms. A few local journalists even reached out digging for more. I ignored them. This was never about fame. It was about reclaiming the voice they'd spent a lifetime trying to silence. But the attention sent shockwaves through my family. Suddenly, the Mercer name wasn't just associated with wealth and prestige. It was linked to coldness, greed, the exact things they tried so hard to hide. And predictably, they blamed me for it without even knowing for sure I was behind it. The first sign came when my mother called, her voice tight and brittle like glass about to shatter. "Caroline, dear, we need to talk. Your father and I were very concerned about recent events." I could practically hear the PR crisis manager breathing down her neck. I told her I was busy. Then Lila showed up at my door unannounced, wearing designer sunglasses and fake humility like armor. She pushed past me into the living room, ignoring the obvious signs of my growing belly hidden under a loose sweatshirt. "Look," she said, pacing like a caged animal, "we can end all of this. We can fix it. But you need to help us." I raised an eyebrow. "Help you?" She nodded fiercely. "Come forward. Say the article isn't about us, Denny, it's about the family. We'll make it worth your while." It hit me then, the pure audacity. After everything, the insults, the dismissal, the backstabbing, they thought they could buy my silence. Bribe me into pretending everything was fine. I leaned back against the wall, arms crossed, studying her. Lila wasn't confident anymore. She wasn't even angry. She was scared. "What exactly are you offering?" I asked, my voice silky smooth. She brightened, mistaking my question for interest. "Half," she said breathlessly. "$500,000 if you just back down." I laughed. I couldn't help it. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the small room. "You think I care about the money?" I said, shaking my head. "You still don't get it, do you?" Lila's face darkened. "You're ruining everything," she spat. "You're burning it all down just because you can't stand that you're not the favorite." I stepped closer, so close she had to tilt her chin up to meet my gaze. "No, Lila," I said quietly. "I'm burning it down because it was never real. And because for once, you don't get to win just by smiling for the cameras." She opened her mouth, then closed it again at a loss for words. For once, she had no comeback, no weapon, no leverage. I watched her storm out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. Alone again, I pressed my hands to my stomach, feeling the steady, reassuring movements of my baby. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't hiding. They could throw whatever they wanted at me. I would not break. Later that night, the final move came an email from my parents' lawyer, polite, formal, lethal. They were reassessing the terms of the promised inheritance, hinting that anyone who brought unwanted attention to the family name might be reconsidered when it came to trust funds and estate distributions. It was meant to scare me, meant to remind me where the real power lay. But as I read it, all I felt was clarity. They still thought they could control me with money. They didn't realize I'd already won the only thing that mattered. I closed my laptop without responding, my heart steady. The $1 million, the family approval, the name, the fortune, it was all hollow. I had something real, something they would never be able to touch or tarnish. And when the time came, I would make sure the entire world knew it. They had tried everything, and they had failed. I didn't plan for it to happen at the gala. Honestly, I wasn't even sure I would go. But when the engraved invitation arrived, another Mercer Foundation charity event, cameras everywhere, the entire family expected to attend, I knew it was the perfect stage. They wanted a show? Fine. I would give them one they'd never forget. I chose a simple black dress, nothing flashy, but it hugged my growing belly in a way that no amount of loose fabric could hide anymore. At nearly 4 months, there was no denying it now. I looked at myself in the mirror before leaving, smoothing my hands over the curve of my stomach. No fear, no shame, just quiet, burning certainty. Tonight, the masks would fall. When I walked into the ballroom, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. Wine glasses froze halfway to lips. My family's faces, my parents, Andrew, Lila, even Carter shifted through a full kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, horror, fury. For one perfect, suspended moment, I was the eye of the storm, calm, unbreakable. I smiled politely, weaving through the crowd, ignoring the whispers that buzzed to life like angry bees. My mother reached me first, her hand clamping down on my arm with surprising force. "Caroline," she hissed, her eyes wild, "what do you think you're doing?" I tilted my head innocently. "Attending a family event, just like you asked." Her gaze dropped to my stomach, and she staggered back as if I had physically struck her. My father appeared beside her, his face an unreadable mask of cold fury. Is this some kind of stunt? He demanded. To embarrass us. His voice was low, deadly. I shook my head, smiling brightly for the crowd now gathering around us like sharks scenting blood. No stunt, just life. You wanted a grandchild, remember? I let the words hang there, heavy and electric. Congratulations, you're getting one. Behind them, Leela's face crumbled, the truth crashing down on her. She wasn't the first. She wouldn't be the one holding the $1 million prize, and worse I was, the sister she thought she had outsmarted, the daughter they had underestimated for decades. Andrew looked shell-shocked. Samantha was already pulling him toward the exit like she couldn't stand the sight of me. Carter just stood there, a strange, grim smile curling his lips, as if he alone understood the full scope of what had just happened. Someone, a photographer, stepped forward, flashing bulbs popping as they snapped pictures of the Mercer family imploding in real time. My mother's hand flew up instinctively to shield her face, but it was too late. The cameras had already captured everything, the anger, the betrayal, the truth. Whispers turned into shouts. Journalists circled. And through it all, I stood tall, one hand resting protectively on my belly, the other smoothing down the front of my dress, utterly, immovably calm. We'll talk about this privately, my father growled under his breath. I smiled sweetly. No, we won't. I think we're done talking. His face darkened, but he knew better than to make a scene. Not here. Not now. Not with the eyes of the city watching. He spun on his heel and stormed out, my mother scurrying after him. Lila followed, trying to save what scraps of dignity she had left. And just like that, I was alone, standing in the glittering chaos, victorious. I stayed at the gala for another hour, chatting with strangers, posing for pictures, answering polite questions with polite half-truths. No, I wasn't married. No, I wasn't worried. Yes, I was thrilled. I didn't owe anyone explanations, not tonight. Not ever. By the time I left, my phone was already buzzing with messages, some from reporters, some from strangers offering congratulations, none from my family. I drove home with the windows down, the cool night air filling my lungs. I had done it. I had faced them. I had stood in the spotlight they tried to use to blind me, and I had burned brighter than all of them. At home, I stood in the nursery that wasn't quite a nursery yet, just a spare room with a rocking chair and a pile of unopened boxes, and let myself breathe. I wasn't naive. I knew they'd come after me again in their own ways, but it didn't matter. The baby shifted inside me, strong and real and perfect, a life built not from bribery or greed, but from hope. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid. I was ready. The next morning, the fallout arrived in waves. I woke up to headlines splashed across local news sites. Mercer family mystery, secret grandchild revealed. There were blurry photos of me from the gala, the flash catching on my small but undeniable baby bump. They didn't know my name yet. Not publicly. Not yet. But it wouldn't be long. I scrolled through the articles with detached calm, sipping my coffee as the world tried to piece together a scandal decades in the making. I knew my family was scrambling behind the scenes, trying to plug the leaks, spin the story, salvage their precious reputation. But there was no saving it now. The truth was out, and no amount of money, manipulation, or threats could put it back in the box. By noon, my parents' lawyer emailed again. This time, the message was different. Polite, apologetic, almost pleading. There was talk of a meeting, a settlement. They wanted to sit down. They wanted to talk family matters, like everything that had happened could be wiped clean with enough signatures and enough zeros on a check. I stared at the email for a long time, feeling the weight of the decision in my hands. If I played by their rules, I could walk away richer than I ever dreamed, set up my child's future without blinking, erase every financial worry before it even started. It was tempting, terrifyingly tempting. But deep down, I knew the truth. If I took their money, they'd own me again. They'd own us. And I would never, ever let that happen. I stood up, pacing the apartment, the afternoon sun slanting in across the hardwood floors. I didn't need their money. I didn't need their approval. I had everything I needed already, the tiny, steady heartbeat inside me, the fierce, stubborn spirit that had carried me this far. And for once, I didn't owe them anything. Not an explanation. Not forgiveness. Not even a goodbye. I sat back down at the laptop and typed a simple reply to the lawyer. Thank you for your offer. I decline. Kindly consider our ties severed. Best, Caroline Mercer. Then I hit send. The weight lifted off me immediately, so sharp, so clean, it almost made me dizzy. They could keep their $1,000,000. They could keep their promises and threats and expectations. I didn't want any part of it. I was carving a different path, one they would never understand, one they could never touch. That night, Megan came over with takeout and balloons, laughing so hard she almost dropped the cake she brought that said, "Congrats, badass," in crooked pink frosting. We sat on the floor, eating noodles and laughing until our stomachs hurt, the baby kicking happily as if sharing in the joke. For the first time, my future didn't look like a battle or a burden. It looked like freedom. It looked like home. Months later, when my daughter was born perfect, healthy, fierce, I named her Hope. Not because I needed her to fix me, not because I needed her to save me, but because she was the proof that life, real life, couldn't be bought or sold or bargained for. It had to be fought for. It had to be earned. And I had finally earned mine. As I sat rocking her in the soft light of the nursery, listening to her tiny breaths, I knew without a doubt they had promised $1,000,000 for a grandchild. But what I got in return was priceless. And it was mine. All mine. If you really enjoyed this story, do not forget to subscribe and watch out for our next video.